I'm expecting a baby. Are you expecting a baby? Well, if you are, I think we all need a second opinion. For obvious reasons. I'm not even dressed in the right color for a boy baby, am I? Second opinions are good things, both in the medical profession and in our life together as Christians. It seems like John the Baptist was seeking a second opinion today, doesn't it? He's in prison for preaching that Jesus is the Messiah. And yet he sends his disciples to say, are you the Messiah? Second opinion. Now some people say he just did that to make sure that his disciples knew Jesus and went with him now that John was in prison. But I really think John was seeking a second opinion because contrary to what we always supposed, there was no such thing in the days of John and Jesus of a Judaism. There were many Judaisms. And as many Judaisms as there were as many different messiahs. There was the George Washington type that was going to come in and throw out these ruling powers. There was the type that wanted the prophet Elijah to come back again and do all the wonderful things that he did. So there were all kinds of expectations for the Messiah. So John might really be having second thoughts and seeking a second opinion. Even in the early days of Christianity, after Jesus had ascended and gone to glory with his Father, the Christians were starting to rethink everything. Listen to what James says years later. His people, a lot of his people, were expecting the return of Jesus almost momentarily. And of course it wasn't happening. And so they were getting impatient and doubtful. And perhaps their faith was being shaken a little bit. So he counsels them to have patience. And now, 2,000 years later, if we're expecting a baby, we're really out of touch. Because the baby Jesus isn't coming back. We can commemorate his arrival. We can commemorate the fact that God chose to become one of us, even as we become one of us, from infancy, conception and infancy onward. But it's not a repeat performance. And so we're not looking for the baby Jesus. Most of us are not looking for Jesus to return too quickly either. Some of the Christians in our country, that's where they seem to be zeroing in and actually getting down to the correct date. Well, who are you and I awaiting? Are you really zeroing in on the return of Jesus? Or are you concentrating on the commemoration of his first arrival? Perhaps we need to take second opinions about our own relationship with Jesus. Because in point of fact, he isn't coming back as a baby, and we don't know when he's coming back as the Messiah, but we do know that he comes every single day into our lives. And that's the coming of Christ that we need to be looking for and expecting and awaiting and preparing ourselves to receive him as he comes. Jesus said, I stand at the door and knock every single day. Not the day of our death, not the day of his return, but every single day God in Christ comes into our lives and expects to be received. The critical thing there is, are we prepared to receive him in the way he comes? People were not prepared to receive an infant Messiah. And some people are preparing to receive a sort of a vindictive Messiah when he comes the final time. But the one who comes to us daily comes in many, many disguises, many, many different forms, almost always in the form of another human being. So when somebody knocks at our door, it might be the next door neighbor who we can't stand. It might be the spouse that we're not getting along with. It might be a sickness which is coming in unexpectedly, or a job loss, or some other event in life which sets us back. The way we receive these people especially is the way we receive Christ. People are always looking for prophets. Prophets are people who speak for God. And we have a prophet in our own time, at least I think so, in the current Bishop of Rome, because he's constantly calling us back to meeting Christ daily in people who are in need. Obviously physical need, but so many times more in the need for friendship, understanding, acceptance, just love in some form. That's where we receive Christ. That's where we can be absolutely certain that he's coming to us, not from the past, and not yet in the future, but in the present. And that's where we really need to receive him. And the patience that James counsels his parishioners to have is not so much patience with Christ, but patience with ourselves. Because even if we have not been receiving the daily Christ as we should, be patient with yourself, he says. Begin to receive the daily Christ as he comes. Because in point of fact, that's the only place now that we can see the advent of Jesus as Lord. In the people who knock at our door, in the circumstances that come down the road to us, in all the events of daily living, that's where Christ is to be found. And if he's not found there, then he's missed.